Once you've opened that line of dialogue with your creditors, they may offer alternative payment options, and those may come in the form of lower payments for a set period of time. It's very important that when you have made some of those payment options with your credit union or your bank, that you ask for that in writing so that there's no confusion between either party. Also, it's important if you're communicating with your creditor by mail. For example, if you're unable to reach the creditors or the collection portion of the company that you're working with, you can write a letter, and I would recommend sending it registered mail, specifically requesting different payment arrangements, lay out the amount of payment that you can afford as opposed to the amount that you're currently obligated to pay, and also make sure that you follow up with that in writing. But if you send it registered mail, you have proof that they have received that, so you know that it got to the right person.
So it doesn't help to ignore phone calls and not open your mail?
No. In fact, that will speed up the collection process more quickly, and it will cause them to start contacting you more often because you'll be viewed as a much bigger risk because they're unable to reach you. If you're willing to communicate with your creditors, they're more willing to work with you typically.
So it'd be important to sit down and decide what you really can do, not promise more than you can do, but then work out an arrangement and then meet the terms of that arrangement as long as you can.
That's a very, very good point, because if you're committing to make a payment that you know that you can't make, then going through all the arrangements of reduced payments isn't going to benefit you, and you will also lose credibility in that process. So make sure if you've committed to a reduced payment, you pay on time, you pay the amount that you said you were going to pay, and make sure that you have realistic expectations for yourself.
One of the options that I hear of Iowans looking at is declaring bankruptcy. I think sometimes we're not aware of some of the long-term implications of declaring bankruptcy, so maybe you could share that with us too.
Yeah, when you file for bankruptcy, you have an option to basically erase all of your debt. However, you will also lose property that has any liens against it, so you will be in a position where you may lose your home, you may lose a vehicle that you have a loan out on. So I always encourage people to look at all other options before considering the bankruptcy option. Also, repercussions of bankruptcy include higher interest rates down the road, inability to be able to be approved for a loan, and starting to rebuild your credit all over again with that on your credit history. You can successfully recover from a bankruptcy if that becomes your only option, but there are many additional steps that you would need to take to recover from bankruptcy as opposed to recovering from a couple late payments on a credit report.
We often hear on television about these services, you know, call me, I'll consolidate your loan, I'll reduce them, on and on and on, and I'll save you money. Do you recommend that persons contact whoever happens to be on TV last night?
I definitely wouldn't recommend contacting someone that you don't have some sort of financial relationship with. Start at your local credit union or your local financial institution to see who they've worked with. You would be surprised how many options that you would get if you stopped in at your local credit union. They work with many different nonprofit agencies, debt consolidating firms, and they've already done the work to make sure that the person that you're working with to consolidate your debt is reputable. And typically a reputable debt consolidator would be someone who is in a nonprofit sector and has no monetary benefit for you working with them.
Okay, good.
For most of us, we know a family member or a friend who is going through these kinds of tough transitions during this recession. You know, and we all want to help. And you just keep watching them going through the struggles, and you think, is it best for us to, you know, donate money to them, or is it, you know, wise for folks to accept money from family and friends?
I think that's a good question. I think lots of people struggle with that. And it really starts with what you're comfortable with as an individual, and also what they're expecting in return from that loan. You know, if it's going to cause that family member a financial burden to help you out, then maybe that's something you're not willing to accept, and then perhaps you could explore other options. However, maybe that situation could be they have the money right now, and it won't be a financial burden until you get back on your feet, and it's going to do you a big favor because it's going to help your credit report reflect that you paid consistently on time without any late payments.
Now, you bring up a good topic, and that's the infamous credit number, credit score, credit report. And oftentimes when someone goes to apply for a job, there may actually be a credit rating or a credit background check done. How do we deal with our credit during these tough times?
Well, if in a perfect world, it would be to avoid any sort of late payments. If that's not always an option, then the second option we've talked about, and that's contacting your creditors to make up payment arrangements. It's also good to ask your creditors if you've made alternative payment arrangements, if they're still going to report on your credit report that you're making lesser payments.
Good point.
Another thing that you can make sure is not overuse your credit cards to create more debt for yourself. And then in the end, you can always explain the situation that you were going through. When an employer pulls your credit, they should disclose that to you. And if they can tell that because of the economic conditions, you were, out of work and seeking employment for the last 6 months, and that's the only trouble you've ever had with payments, then the situation kind of matches what the credit report says.
Now, that would also be good because whoever you've been working with at your bank or any of your creditors could actually be a reference for you to say, look, this person came forth, didn't lie, did what they said they were going to do, and went on.
Absolutely.
Amanda, thank you again. That's all the time we have for this segment of the show. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. If you want more information, go to iowaworkforce.org/IowaWorksTV.